Hi, this is Mike Kent again from San Jacinto College on the Central Campus, and I want to continue describing some fundamental concepts to Microsoft Access from Office 2010. Last time in the first video I created a simple table for my Acme Corporation, and we had the employee table. I'll double click on it here, and we created a table and designed it, and then we added these records to my database. And you can see down here there's 12 records. What I want to do today is show you how to extract information from a database by creating and running queries. So I'm going to go to the Create tab, and I want to create a query, and I'm going to use the Query Wizard. First thing it asks you is what kind of query. Well, I want a simple query wizard, so I'll hit OK. And now it's going to ask me, where do you want to get the data from? Well, if you see, I only have one object in my database right now. It's a table called employee. So if I hit my drop down here, that's my only choice. But this is all the fields that are a part of the employee table. I'm going to add them all to the query by hitting this double arrow button. And then I'm going to hit next. I want a detail query. I'm going to hit next. And that's not what I want to name it though. I'm going to call this query over 50K, because in this query I want to find everybody in my company that makes more than $50,000 a year. And I want to open it up in the Modify Query Design screen. So now I'm going to hit Finish. Here's all the fields in my table. They all have little check marks. That means they're going to show up when I run this query by hitting the Run button over here. Right now I'm in the Salary column. I go down to the Criteria row and I say greater than 50,000. Now, if I run this, there's everybody in my company that makes more than $50,000 a year, including this guy who makes a lot of money. Boy, that Mike Kent sure does rake it in. Well, he's the CEO, so he should make a lot of money, right? But let me go back to my design window here. I'm going to hit my drop down under View. Make sure you're on Home, View. Then I can go back to Design. Let me show you a common mistake people make. When you're typing in numbers for a query, for a number field, don't put the comma. If I try to run this query right now, it's going to give me a really weird error. You have entered an invalid comma or omitted a quotation mark. So it doesn't want that comma right there. So there's that nice message. I'm going to get rid of that comma. Then I can run this query. You see I named it over 50K. I'm going to hit the Close button right here, and it's going to ask me, do you want to save your changes? And I'll say yes. Now, anytime I double click on this query, it'll bring it up. It'll bring it up in the datasheet view. If I wanted to modify the design of this query, I could then switch to design view, or I could actually right click on it right here and say go to design view. Alright, so I'm finished with this query. I want to make another query. This time I want to find everybody that works in the transportation department of my mythical company. So once again I'm going to go to Create, and I'm going to say Query Wizard. I want a simple query. OK. See right here though, look at my data source. It's defaulted to use my previous query as my data source. I don't want that. I'm going to hit the drop down and I want to switch to Table Employees. And I'm going to bring, once again, I'm going to bring all the fields into the query. I'm going to hit Next. I want a detail query. Next. Make sure I change the name up here. I'm going to call it Trans Department. And I want to open it up in the design view. So I want to set my criteria to be the transportation, the people that equal transportation. So you see it put trans in here, and it's a good idea when you're putting a code in, this is a text field, to always put double quotes. So I'm saying find everybody who's equal to trans. So I'm going to hit Run. There's everybody that works in the transportation department. If I go to close this, it's going to say you have unsaved changes. Do you want to save it? I'll say yes. So now anytime I want to see the people in the transportation department, I can just double click on this query I've saved, just like I can double click on over 50,000. So I'm going to move along a little bit. Now I want to run a query that only has certain fields and has a sort. So I'm going to do Query Wizard again, simple query. make sure you're choosing your table as your data source. And this time I only want certain fields. So this time I want employee ID, so I'm just going to hit the single arrow, last name, first name, and department. So that's the only 4 fields I want to have show up in this query. I'm going to hit next. I don't want it to be called employee query. I'm going to call it employees by last name. And I want to modify the design, and I'm going to hit finish. So now you see there's only those 4 fields showing up. And I want to sort by last name, so I go down to the sort row underneath last name and I say ascending. Now if I run this, there's everybody in my company sorted by last name. If I go back to design view, all I did was pick the sort I wanted for that field. Now I'm going to hit save. So now the last query I'm going to do is a compound query where I have more than one criteria. I want to find everybody in my company who's female and they make more than $30,000 a year. So I go to the Create tab, Query Wizard, Simple Query. I want to make sure I'm pulling my source from employees. And the fields I want in this query are last name, first name, salary, and gender. Then I'm going to hit next. I want to detail. Let's give it a better name here. Let's call it females making money. And I want to modify my design. So I have these 4 fields from the employee table. So I want to give this query more than one criteria. So first criteria is greater than $30,000 for salary. The second criteria is you got to be a female. Okay? So those are the 2 criteria I want, and since they both have to be true, I put them on the same row. That makes it an AND condition. Salary has to be greater than $30,000 and gender has to be female. So if I run this right now, there's all the women in the company that make more than $30,000 a year. If I go back to design, if I was to put these 2 criteria on separate rows, like I'll delete female right there and I'll move it down a row, okay? So now you see this row says OR, so these are 2 separate conditions. Now if I run it, you're either going to show up in the answer table because you make $30,000 a year or you're female. So I'm going to hit run. So now you see we have some males showing up in the answer table because they make more than $30,000. We also have, for example, Trisha Transport is showing up. She doesn't make more than $30,000, but she's a female. So if you put the conditions on separate rows, that's an OR. If you put them on the same row, that's an AND condition. So this is what you want for this query. We want females greater than $30,000. I got 5 hits, 5 matches. If I go to close this, it's going to say, do you want to save? And I'm going to say yes. Alright, so now you can see I have these queries saved. Anytime I want to run them, I can double click on them. We're going to do one more thing before I exit. I want to create a form, because you usually don't enter your data in table view. You usually do it one record at a time in a data entry form. So to create the form, I need to click on employee right here on my employee table, and then I'm going to go create form. So this is typically, if you're entering data into a database, you'll have a form like this, and you can maneuver through the records, or it'll have buttons so you can search, but this is typically how people enter data into a database, is just by creating a simple form. And if I go to close this, you'll say, do you want to save it? I'll say yes. What name do you want to call it? I'm going to call it employee form. So now you can see I've got my employee form, I've got my employee table, and I've got all my various queries. And that's all I wanted to show you today.